In this video, we'll look at making some of the unpredictability of Qubit's Bloom sequencer a bit more manageable. We'll take a single sequence and add some variation while keeping it a bit more predictable and controlled. In channel 1 of Bloom, I have a simple 16-step sequence programmed in. It's in harmonic minor, and it's set to A with the root note. And here's what that sounds like. So typically, if we want to vary that up, we can play with the mutation knob, which will randomly change random notes within the sequence, or we can play with the branches and path knobs, which let's just set it. You can hear we're already losing the rhythm, the pattern, the key, and just kind of all over the place and unmanageable. So first I'll show you how we can manage that by self-patching with channel 2 and the root input. We're going to be shifting the sequence in a chord progression type manner. For this, we'll be using channel 2 to self-patch into the root control for channel 1. So first, let's go over to channel 2, and we'll clear this out. And with channel 1, we had a 16-step sequence, so I'm going to match that. And then to make this sequence longer so we can do the chord progressions, we want to add ratchets. And we're going to add 8 to each one, making this into a 128-step sequence instead of just 16. Note that the ratchets doesn't act like you would expect with ratchets, where it would add 8 notes in between the beats, like a clock divider. It actually works as a step repeat, so it repeats each step 8 times. First, we can clear out all the notes in our sequence. So first, we want our root note in the sequence, so we want to turn the first note on and just have it at the lowest and make sure our root is all the way down. And for our scale, we could just go into unquantized for this, and then it'll work as if we're turning the root knob on its own or using a keyboard input to the root knob. And then on step 9, we want to change our pitch so we can go up a little bit in our pitch here. So we'll throw that up a little bit here, and then we'll stop our sequence, and now we can self-patch the output into the root input, and we switch back over to channel 1. And now you'll hear once the pattern repeats itself, it's going to change key, what it sounds like. So you could hear already how we could get interesting chord progressions with a sequence from channel 2. So here I just loaded in a pattern I had already saved on Bloom. This is step 9, where we have the note change. And then on step 13, I have another note change. And then on the last step, we have the root note up an octave. When we're back in channel 1, we want to make sure we don't touch our root knob, or we bring it back to that A note. So we can see that adds a lot more musical nature to this with a nice song progression. Also, what we can do is on channel 2 is play with the branches here. Let's turn that up to 4, and that'll give us a little bit more random variation on our sequence with the chord or the key of that sequence, and not really change the sequence itself. Another trick we can do is play with the mutation input from the gate or output from channel 2. For this, I'm just using the outputs. We can get a full mutation. We can really hear what's going on. So first we'll move over to channel 2 and we'll clear this out. And we want to go back to our 16 steps. And again, we're going to clear out the 16 steps. So I think in this sequence, we want to put our mutation on the very last 2 notes of the sequence, and then we can hear that probably the best. So here's our sequence to begin with. So these 2 notes. So we're going to go over to channel 2, and we're going to actually go just before those 2 notes. So instead of going here and here, we're going to turn on this one and this one. And we're going to put our gates all the way up for both of them. So we can make sure that the mutation knob is all the way up for and through both of those notes. And that gives us the best chance of those notes changing in the sequence. So now we could go back over to channel 1 and plug the output 2 into the mutation. And now we could hear what that sounds like, and we'll hear each time, or nearly each time, these 2 notes will change. And this gives us a bit more predictability and a bit more repetition with our pattern while varying it up. And if you paired up your gates with your outputs, you could actually make the note changes into the root at the same time. Let's actually see what this sounds like. I added some notes to these 2 steps of the channel here, so we could hear that the sequence will shift when it hits those notes. But we actually need it again on that first note, bring us back to that root. So we're going to go all the way down, and we're going to have it at the lowest gate possible, which is by default. So it's least likely to add any mutations. And we don't have a note in that spot in the sequence anyway. So we could hear it shifting the sequence for those notes, and it's making those notes random each time. And this last step, dealing with the branches, is not going to be self-patching. It's just going to be more cycling through the pattern over and over again to reach the right algorithm that works well with that song. So first, we just want we want 2 good branches to start with, which is, we have our left path and our right path for that second branch. So I don't really like that one to start, and let's hear the other one. And I don't like that one either. So what we can actually do is this pattern is saved, is I just load the pattern again. And we try again. So that's doing a shift of the pitch down a little bit, which is, it's okay. And I don't like that one, so we're going to reset it again. Okay, so I found a good branch I like just by keep resetting and checking each side of the path. And now anytime we change our sequence, it's going to basically reset that algorithm again, and we're going to have to save it and cycle through if we want something good to, say, perform with, that it had a good riff that we heard. So I think this is a decent first branch that we have. It keeps the general pattern of it while changing up the notes, and I think that'll give us a little better branches. So basically, the best tip is to start with a good first branch And then the rest of the branches off that should be relatively close to that and better off than starting with a poor first branch. We're cycling through the pattern here. It's basically resetting the algorithm of what it's going to do to mutate or change your pattern. It could invert the notes. It could invert all the gates of the sequence. It could shift everything an octave up or down. It could shift everything up or down a step or two. It can do all sorts of things. So we're basically cycling through those to get a good one. Sometimes each one works better than another for specific songs or specific sequences. And then usually if you just stay on the side of that good path from 50% on or 50% before, all these branches, no, not those. So these 4 branches with this should be great. And that is it for this video's patch tips on qubit bloom, managing the chaos.